Hey guys, I'm Chris from the Silver Symbol channel, and today we're on my workshop channel. This is where I'm going to put more detailed builds, and this one is just that. I'm going to be installing 2 security cameras from Ubiquiti in the middle of my woods. What's unique about this installation is I wanted these cameras to be mounted directly on top of a post. I wanted a streamlined look, and since I'm installing them in the woods, they're really susceptible to damage, so I did not want to spend a lot of money. So even when this entire job was done, I still spent less than $200 a camera. You start off with your G3 Flex camera. It's cheap at 120 bucks. It is just a 2K camera, but I think for most people that is more than enough, especially for a security camera. But here's the secret. You need to get this thing called the Ubiquiti pendant adapter. A lot of places don't even have this in stock, but you can buy it direct, and the best part is it's only 10 bucks. On the bottom of the adapter, it is threaded. Now in some companies or corporate installs, you're going to have a pipe or a conduit sticking from the ceiling, and that allows you to mount the camera upside down. But I'm going to actually do the reverse. I'm going to install the camera pointing upright, but I want to screw it onto some pipe that I'm going to put in the ground. This is 1.5 inch galvanized pipe. Now this 10-foot piece cost me 70 bucks, which is kind of expensive, but this pipe is not like copper pipe. It is super thick, and because it's threaded on both ends, I'm able to cut this pipe in the middle and do 2 separate installations. Now here I'm going to cut this thing with a plasma cutter because I do a little bit of metal work and I have access to these tools. And you can still cut it with either a cutting disc or even something just like a hacksaw. With most pipes or posts, you want to put them in the ground about 1/3 of your total length. Now just a couple of inches above that, I need to cut out a hole. I'm going to use my plasma cutter to make both of these holes, but of course if you don't have this, you can just use something like a drill bit, but you probably want to use a bimetal hole saw. And because I'll be passing an RJ45 through the bottom, you're going to want to make that hole about 3/4 of an inch, and it can be bigger, but I wouldn't go much smaller. Now with my 2 pipes cut, I'm ready to dig the holes and put them in the ground. Now I need to just secure the pipe. Now I made this install quite a bit easier by simply drilling that hole in the bottom of the pipe. I'm going to feed that cable right through the hole. If I used conduit, any water that gets inside this pipe is going to go right into the conduit and build up and probably eventually freeze. To secure the pipe, I'm going to use this $11 bag of expanding foam. Using this foam is pretty easy. You just roll the bag until you break the seam in the middle, mix it for about 15 seconds, and then simply cut the bag open and pour the contents into the hole. And what's uniquely awesome about this foam is it sets up super quickly. In fact, so fast, I'm not even going to level the pipe beforehand. I'm just going to hold onto it with this level that I've attached, and I only need to hold on to this for about 2 minutes before the foam is actually set up enough so that you can walk away. And don't worry about all this foam that's kind of mushrooming out of the top. Once this thing is dry in about 4 hours, I can actually cut off the excess and then continue with the install. With the foam set up, I'm ready to move on to the next step. Now by using this galvanized pipe, you've got another benefit. It is extremely resistant to rust. So you could just leave this in the ground as is, and it really wouldn't rust at all, with the exception of that hole that I cut out in the bottom. To fight that, I'm going to use a little bit of Flex Seal. Next, I want to paint this entire thing black. I want it to be stealthy, and though black here in the video kind of stands out, once this thing gets a little bit dirty and dusty, it will blend in so well with the trees, you would drive right past it and you never even notice it. But be aware, if you do want to paint your galvanized pipe, pretty much any type of spray paint is actually going to flake off in about 1 to 2 years. That's because the galvanization kind of fights the paint and it eats it away and the bond is broken. Instead, I'm going to use this paint called Black Shell. Now this stuff can be expensive. I'm actually using it for my gate installation that I'm going to show you guys in another video, but it's specifically rated for galvanized metal. So no matter what kind of paint you get, make sure it says it can be used on galvanized metal. With our paint dry, we're ready to install our camera. But before we do that, I've actually got to spray paint these cameras too. But be aware, you'll want to tape up anything on that camera that is black, at least on this model, before you spray paint it. You've got some infrared emitters around the lens and of course the lens itself. I'm going to use this Rust-Oleum paint. It's a safer plastic. I did wipe the plastic down with some rubbing alcohol first, but that's probably all you need to do. With a good coating of spray paint all over the adapter and the camera, now we're ready to complete the installation. Now before we put our camera on, we need to do a couple of things. We've of course got to run our network cable up the pole, and if you are pushing a plug through that pipe, you're not going to want to get dirt and stuff like that in it, so go ahead and put something on it, maybe a finger from a rubber glove like I've done here. You can go ahead and just plug your RJ45 into the bottom of this camera and insert it into the adapter. But the G3 Flex has a warning. They say you're not supposed to install it anywhere that it doesn't have protection above. That normally means something like an eave on the side of your house. But in this case, I'm less worried because the camera is pointed upright. Now we've got to connect up this camera, and I'm going to tell you guys, especially the IT ones out there, kind of brace yourself. It's not a water meter box as it's labeled. This is actually a midway point along the cable run on my driveway, but it's not a regular type of conduit as you can see. This is actually a piece of sprinkler pipe. This pipe is almost 1,000 feet long. It goes all the way up to my barn, which is the next connection point into my network, and without this point, there would just be no way to connect any type of camera like this. It was also an incredibly cheap way to do these cable runs. It's also the midway point to connect into my gate, which is behind me. To make things even weirder, this cable is almost 600 feet long, and it is copper. And if you know anything about networking, you're never supposed to run copper beyond about 300 to 330 feet. But this blue cable isn't regular network cable. It's not fiber, it's a product called GameChanger. And it's rated for runs up to about 800 feet, and some people have even run it over 1,000 feet with surprisingly good results. The secret to this GameChanger cable is surprisingly simple. When it comes to longer cable runs in the electric world, what happens? Voltage drops if the cable gets very long. To compensate for that, we run thicker cable, and that allows you to maintain the voltage that you want. But when it comes to computer wiring, there's another problem we don't really see in the electric world, and that is interference. If you run a computer cable really long, it might actually work, but it'll be so much more subject to interference and other problems that the connection will not be stable. GameChanger addressed this two different ways. First, to compensate for voltage drop, they run a thicker cable. Normal network wiring is 24 gauge or 23 gauge cable, but GameChanger went one step further. Their cabling is actually 22 gauge. And you'll instantly notice this because when you're running this stuff or picking up a box of it, it weighs significantly more. That fixed the voltage drop, but what about the interference? Well, they compensated for that, not by using any type of shielding, because that would add more weight and more expense. Instead, they actually changed the way that the twisting is done within the network cable. Now, if you're not familiar with this, the wires are twisted to help prevent interference and crosstalk from the other connections. But by doing that and increasing the thickness of the cable, they actually can combat not just voltage drop, but interference as well. Now, if you're an old timer like me that doesn't want to change your ways, you might be saying this is just total BS. There's no way that could work. But it is different, and in fact, this cable is actually patented because of these changes they made. So now that we've covered that, let's plug in this camera and we can get things connected. With everything connected up and working, now I need to just bury the cable, and I also definitely want to protect that hole on the bottom of the pole. I will nylon tie this cable against the pole, so there'll only be a very small amount of it exposed, but I'll then use some duct seal over that cable and the hole itself. That should keep critters and bugs out, and it will stop any excess water from getting in there. After I put these in, I immediately started seeing all sorts of neat things. First of which was a bear going down my driveway, and I also learned that my wife is like Mario Andretti going by these cameras every day. So that's the install. You can let me know in the comments what you think if I'm out of my mind, or maybe you learned something in this video that you didn't know and possibly it was useful. Please give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to the workshop channel and my main channel, I'd really appreciate it if you did that, and you can check out what I'm doing and see all the projects that I've got underway.